Chapter 1. A Chance Arrival. The train rolled into Gare du Nord beneath a misty sky, trailing a ribbon of gray behind it. Rain tapped gently against the glass, tracing uncertain paths like the quiet thoughts of the girl who sat near the window. Her name was Élise, and Paris was not her destination. Not really. It was a pause, a breath, a place to forget, if only for a few days, who she was and what she'd left behind. She stepped onto the platform, her suitcase trailing behind her with a soft rattle. Her coat was too thin for the rain, and her scarf too loose. But she didn't seem to mind. There was something strangely fitting about the drizzle, as if the city itself was weeping softly, but without sadness. Just memory. Élise didn't speak to anyone as she made her way through the station. Her world was silent, inward. Her eyes drank in the arches, the hurried feet, the aroma of espresso from a nearby kiosk. Everything was unfamiliar, and yet oddly welcoming, like a story she'd heard once as a child but couldn't quite remember. She didn't know where she was going. That was the point. Outside, Paris stretched in quiet elegance beneath a sky of pewter. Narrow streets shimmered with puddles. Shop windows blinked warm yellow light against the gray. A street musician, violin, slow and sad, played near the metro entrance. Élise paused, listening. One note, then another. She closed her eyes. She remembered how it felt to be safe, to be understood. But that was before. She turned a corner. Another. Wandered, letting the city guide her. She passed a flower stall spilling with peonies and lavender, a baker pulling warm loaves from a brick oven, a black cat on a windowsill blinking at the world. Everything moved gently. Everything breathed. And then, as she reached a quiet alley near Montmartre, the sky opened. The rain came suddenly, harder now, a rush like the city exhaling. She gasped and darted beneath the nearest awning, clutching her bag to her chest. Wet strands of hair stuck to her cheeks. She laughed, a soft, breathy sound, surprised by itself. And that's when she saw him. He was standing just a few feet away, already soaked, his dark jacket clinging to him, his curls dripping. A grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. His eyes sparkled, not with mischief, exactly, but with something brighter. Alive. Quite the welcome, he said in English, nodding toward the downpour. Élise hesitated. Then, almost shyly, she replied, I think Paris likes to surprise people. He stepped a little closer under the awning, not too close. Respectful. Warm. Well, it's working, he smiled. I'm Leo. She blinked, uncertain, but something in his tone, light, unforced, made her feel, not cornered but noticed, in a way that didn't scare her. Leo didn't seem in a hurry to move, even as the rain spilled like silver threads across the cobblestones. He tilted his head toward her, curious but gentle. So, he said, are you running from something, or towards something? Élise's eyebrows rose, not offended but surprised. She wasn't used to strangers asking such questions. And yet, it didn't feel invasive. Just honest. She looked away, watching the rain hit the street. I'm not sure, she murmured. Maybe both. Leo smiled, but didn't press. Instead, he pointed across the narrow street, where the warm glow of a tiny cafe pulsed through the windows. Coffee? Or whatever people drink when they arrive in Paris by accident. She hesitated only a second, then nodded. The cafe was nearly empty, its wooden floors creaking softly under their feet. A soft jazz melody drifted from a vintage radio in the corner, all saxophones and memory. The waitress barely looked up as they chose a corner table by the window. Outside, the rain softened again, like the city was listening. They sat opposite each other, not quite smiling, not quite strangers anymore. Are you from here? Élise asked, her voice quieter now, softened by the warmth of the room. Leo chuckled. Born in Marseille, but Paris is better for dreaming. You're a dreamer? Guilty, she smiled, the first real one he saw, and it lit her face like morning. 2 cups arrived. Hers was tea, his was espresso black. He stirred absently. What about you? He asked. You don't look like a tourist. She wrapped both hands around her cup, as if trying to hold something steady. I needed to leave. Somewhere else. Somewhere small. He waited. She didn't explain further. He didn't ask. Instead, he said, then you're in the right place. Paris lets you disappear. Or begin. That caught her. She glanced up. You talk like someone from a book. Leo grinned. I write stories. Of course you do. There was a pause. Not awkward, just slow and deep like the spaces between notes and music. Outside, the rain began to ease. A man walked by with a red umbrella. Somewhere a bell chimed. Do you believe, she said, almost to herself, that some people are meant to meet? Leo didn't answer right away. He leaned back, his eyes on hers. Then softly, I think some people are meant to change the direction of your life, even if you only meet them once. A silence followed. Not empty, but full. Something had shifted, slightly, quietly, but it was there. The days that followed felt like the world had slowed just for them. They fell into a quiet rhythm, not planned, not discussed, just found. Mornings began with tea and shared silences. Élise wrapped in Leo's oversized sweater, her legs curled under her on the window bench. He'd write in his notebook, glancing at her more often than at the page. Sometimes he'd read her fragments aloud, not as stories, just phrases, images. Her voice was made of soft edges and storms. The way she touched the book was how others touched lovers. She would smile, blush, and press her face in her knees. They explored Paris as if it were a secret made only for them. They bought croissants from the tiny boulangerie that smelled like vanilla and melted butter. They found an old cinema that played silent films on Sundays. They danced again, this time in the rain, laughing under a tree on Isle St. Louis, soaked but radiant. And then, one evening, Leo led her into a candle-lit room above a small cafe. There, waiting quietly, were 4 people, smiling, curious. My friends, he said softly, the ones who kept me sane before you. Élise froze. She hadn't expected this. Not yet. Her world had become so safely small. Just the 2 of them. This felt like a crack in a glass. Leo must have sensed it, because he reached for her hand under the table and whispered, We'll leave whenever you want. But she didn't. She stayed. They asked gentle questions, told stories. One of them, a painter named Camille, looked at Élise for a long time and said, You have a voice like twilight. Élise didn't know what to say to that. But Leo smiled. That's why I can't stop writing. Later, while the others were caught in conversation, Élise stepped onto the balcony alone. The city stretched below, lights like breathing. The moon hung heavy. Leo joined her quietly, wrapping his arms around her from behind. You don't have to belong to this world, he said, only to what feels true. She nodded. I think I want to try. Chapter 2, where we begin to stay. The cafe was crowded that evening, filled with music, perfume, and the murmur of people who knew they were being watched. Leo was there with her, his arm casually draped over the back of her chair. But his smile changed the moment she walked in. Tall, effortlessly elegant, the kind of presence that made silence follow her. She wore a deep green coat and red lipstick that didn't smudge when she smiled. And she smiled at Leo. Lucy, he said, standing too quickly. Élise's heart fluttered, not in the way it used to when he looked at her, but in that cold, hollow way, like something beautiful had cracked inside her. Lucy walked over, kissed both his cheeks, and turned to Élise with polite curiosity. And who's this? They exchanged names. Smiles. Nothing sharp, not on the surface. But something in the air had shifted. Lucy sat, ordered wine, spoke easily about galleries in New York and those months in Marseille. Leo listened, nodded, laughed once, and that laugh hit Élise in the ribs like a quiet punch. He hadn't laughed like that with her tonight. Not quite like that. She excused herself and went to the restroom. She stared at her reflection, pale, damp-eyed, lips pressed thin. What am I doing here? She's someone from his world. I'm just passing through. She stayed in the small tiled room longer than she needed to. When she returned, Lucy had left. Leo was alone at the table, looking down at his hands. I shouldn't have stayed, Élise said softly. He looked up, his eyes tired. No, he said. I shouldn't have let her speak to you like you were temporary. Then Élise whispered, Were you in love with her? Yes, Leo answered. She nodded, looking away. But I never stayed with her after the silence came, he added. With you, I hear everything. Back at the apartment, they didn't speak much. Leo poured tea, but neither drank. He reached for her, slowly, not to pull, but to offer. And she came to him, even through the storm in her chest. He rested his forehead against hers. I'm afraid of losing things before they even belong to me, she said. His voice broke when he replied, Then let me belong. They didn't sleep much that night, not because of words, but because of their absence. They lay together, not touching, just close enough for their breaths to mingle in the space between. At one point, Élise turned toward him in the dark and whispered, Do you ever wish you were someone simpler? Leo exhaled slowly. Only before I met you. Now I want to be exactly who I am, but braver. By morning, he was gone, just to the kitchen. But still, her chest squeezed when she woke alone. She rose slowly, wrapped herself in his old gray shirt, and wandered through the quiet apartment. The light was soft, muted by the morning clouds, falling gently on the shelves of books and dried lavender. Then she saw it, a small stack of paper, handwritten in black ink, resting on the edge of his desk. The first page read, Before I knew her. Her heart skipped. She sat on the edge of the bed and began to read. She walked through my dreams before she walked into my life. There was always a girl with quiet eyes and weather in her soul, a girl I never thought existed, until the wind brought her into the cafe that day, clutching a book like it might save her. She doesn't speak loudly, but when she laughs, my world steadies. And when she doubts herself, it breaks. Élise covered her mouth with one hand. I don't know how to deserve her, but I think I'd rather be undeserving and beside her than empty and proud alone. Let me love her the way silence loves the stars, without asking to shine, only to witness. Tears slid down her cheeks. When Leo returned with 2 mugs of tea, he paused in the doorway. She didn't hide the pages, didn't wipe her eyes. I'm not used to being seen this clearly, she said. He placed the mugs down and knelt in front of her. I've seen you since before I had a name for you, he whispered. And now I don't know how to unsee you. She leaned forward, rested her forehead against his. And for a long moment, they breathed together. Not lovers, not broken people, just 2 souls learning how to stay. They left Paris before sunrise. Leo drove a borrowed car, one hand on the wheel, the other reaching for hers in the quiet moments between songs. The city faded behind them, exchanged for vineyards, hills, and the pale gold of southern light. Élise leaned her head against the window, watching the sky change. Where are we going? She asked. To the edge of everything, Leo said with a smile. And then a little further. By afternoon, they reached the coast. A tiny village, sleepy and sun-soaked, with blue shutters and salt in the air. The house they rented sat above the sea. Old stone, creaky doors, and a terrace with a view that made Élise forget how to breathe. They didn't do much that first evening. She read under a fig tree. He made pasta with too much garlic. They ate barefoot on the floor, toes touching, no words needed. And that night, they stood on the terrace in silence, watching the moon melt over the waves. The next day, they found the old lighthouse. It stood alone on a cliff, faded and forgotten. They climbed to the top, breathless and laughing, and sat on the edge, legs dangling into the wind. Leo pulled a flask from his coat and offered her a sip. She smiled. My parents never let me drink, even on my birthday. His face turned, gently curious. You never talk about them. She hesitated. Then, quietly, my father left when I was 6. My mother stopped smiling when I was 10. I learned early how to disappear. Leo didn't speak, just took her hand. Later, back at the house, they walked down to the beach in the dark. The sand was cold, the stars sharp above them. The sea glowed faintly, phosphorescence sparkling like magic when their feet touched the waves. Élise ran ahead, laughing, her dress clinging to her knees. Leo followed, caught her gently from behind, arms wrapping around her waist. She turned in his arms, wet and shivering. I never thought I'd feel this, she whispered. This lightness, like I'm not made of broken things. You're not, he said. You're made of sky. They didn't rush. There was no urgency, no fire. Only warmth. Hands in hair, lips to collarbone, eyes open. And when they lay on the sand beneath the stars, wrapped in a towel, and each other, she traced his chest with her fingers and asked, "Why did you stop writing novels?" He looked at the sky for a long time before answering. "Because I wrote one I couldn't finish," he said. "It ended too soon, and I never forgave the page." She kissed his shoulder. "Maybe this is the next chapter." Paris welcomed them back with gray skies and golden leaves. It was October now. The city smelled like cinnamon, wet pavement, and the first sigh of autumn. But something had shifted. Not in the city. In them. At first, it was small things. Élise hesitated before unlocking her apartment door. Leo took longer walks alone, notebook always in hand. They still shared mornings, kisses, laughter, but there was a question between them now. Unspoken. Shy. Can this last? One evening, they visited a second-hand bookstore tucked behind the opera house. The air inside was thick with paper and memory. Leo disappeared into the poetry section, and Élise wandered alone, letting her fingers glide over the worn spines. She paused at a book with no title, opened it, and read. She moved like a secret, and I followed her even when she didn't see me. She closed it gently and smiled. When they left, Leo seemed distant. Not cold, just quiet. Like something inside him was speaking louder than the street around them. Back at his apartment, she made tea. Leo stayed at the window, notebook open, pen frozen midair. Then, softly, "I started something." She looked up. He turned toward her and read. "The woman in the story doesn't know she's the story." A pause. She thinks she's a side character. But really, the world began the day she walked in, soaked from the rain, carrying a book in silence. Élise didn't speak. Her hands trembled around the teacup. Leo placed the notebook on the table and came to sit beside her. "Can I write you?" he asked. Her voice cracked. "You already have." He brushed her cheek with his fingers, gently lifting her face. "I'm not afraid anymore," he whispered. "But if you are, I'll wait. I'll stay." They stayed like that for a long time. No kisses, no promises, just presence, and the beginning of a story they both wanted to live inside. Together. Chapter 3, where we choose to stay. It rained on her birthday. Not the sharp, cutting rain of winter, but soft, almost secret. The kind that made the world feel smaller. Closer. Élise stood by the window in Leo's apartment, barefoot, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold. She didn't mind. Outside, Paris shimmered under clouds. Inside, it was quiet. The kind of quiet you only get with someone who knows you. Leo came in, slightly out of breath, holding a paper bag. "I brought you something," he said, cheeks pink from the wind. She smiled, small, honest. "What is it?" He set the bag down, pulled out a book wrapped in brown paper, a single white candle, and a music box. Élise blinked. "A music box? Open it." She did. The melody was slow, aching familiar. Not a song she could name, but one she felt somewhere in her chest, like something from childhood or a forgotten dream. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, he was watching her, carefully, as if waiting to see whether she'd let the emotion surface. "Where did you find this?" she whispered. "It reminded me of you," he said. Quiet, beautiful, a little old-fashioned. She laughed softly, then cried. Not loudly, just a few tears, like petals falling. And Leo didn't ask why. He just stepped forward, and she leaned into his arms. Later that night, after wine and mismatched candles and a cake that nearly burned, Leo handed her the book. No wrapping now, just a leather journal, with the title handwritten in gold ink. "For the days I didn't know you yet." She opened it. Inside were moments, tiny scenes, snippets of their days. A line from the cafe, a phrase she once said in sleep, a sketch of her hands, the first poem he ever wrote about her. She didn't speak, just ran her fingers over the pages, then looked up. "Now." He didn't let her finish. He pulled her to her feet, held both her hands, and said, quietly, not with drama, but with truth, "I love you. I have for a long time. And if you don't say anything right now, that's okay. But I had to tell you, because you're my favorite sentence in this entire city." She didn't cry this time. She smiled. The kind of smile that made her eyes glow and her chest rise with something too full for words. And then, finally, "You're the only place I've ever wanted to stay." They walked through Paris as if the night was written just for them. The streets were nearly empty. Rain fell, soft, persistent, not to chase them home, but to baptize them into something new. Élise didn't speak. She simply slipped her fingers into Leo's and squeezed, grounding herself in the warmth of him, in the breath of this moment. They passed closed cafés, glowing windows, lovers under umbrellas. The world was music, and they were the lyrics. By the Seine, they paused. The river moved like ink beneath the bridges. Élise leaned against the railing, face turned toward the lights. Her cheeks were wet, from rain or something more. She didn't say. Leo stood beside her, quiet. "I used to think love would feel like fire," she said. He turned. "But this," she continued, "it's like fog lifting. Like finding a room in myself I didn't know had windows." Leo's breath caught. Then, gently, nervously, he pulled something from his coat. A small, folded page. She took it, opened it. There, in his handwriting, was a single sentence. "Would you let me write your name, over and over, until the last line of me?" She looked up, eyes wide, and he knelt, not with a ring, but with both hands open, as if offering not a question, but his whole life. "I don't care how long it takes," Leo said. "I just want to keep choosing you. Every page, every day." Élise didn't answer with words. She dropped to her knees, too, in the middle of the wet street, and kissed him, rain mingling with the salt of their joy. They laughed, breathless. Someone across the river cheered. A violin played faintly in the distance. And above them, the clouds broke, just slightly. Weeks later, in the same cafe where they first met, Élise opened a new book. The title read, "When the Rain Found Her," by El Marceau. The dedication was simple, to the girl who walked in, and to the woman who stayed. She smiled. Outside, Paris was glowing, and from the speakers above, a melody played softly, the same one from her music box. She closed the book, looked across the table. Leo sat there, holding a pen, watching her like she was the only story that ever mattered. The end.